Hey there, Stefan Molyneux. Welcome to your Wednesday night live. I hope you're doing well. Please don't forget wordwardebate.com to get your tickets for my reemergence back into the public square. I'll be taking on the question of God versus non-God, and it's going to be an amazing debate. I'll be there all weekend. We'll have lots of chances to sit and chat. There'll be a meet up there for Free Domain listeners. Thank you all so much. Wordwardebate.com. Use the promo code, my first name, Stefan, Stefan. Use the promo code, get 10% off. Boy, the tickets are going fast. I'd hate to see you disappointed. Wordwardebate.com. Go now. I'll wait to start the show until you go. Hey everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain. Hope you're doing well. So yeah, just wanted to push back on some, I think it's misinformation. And the misinformation has been floating around social media. It kind of pops up from time to time. But the misinformation, I think, is about the COVID vaccines produce a first trimester miscarriage rate of 80%, 82%, 84%. And it's partly come back out because Fauci's phone was turned over, and apparently he had some concerns about miscarriages with COVID and so on, which of course is pretty terrible because he was on TV telling all the women that it was safe. It was safe for pregnant women. And of course, look, I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist. I am not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but there's absolutely no way that they could have known that the COVID vaccine was safe for pregnant women because they tested it less than the length of an entire pregnancy. So what did they tested it for a couple of months? Pregnancy's 9 months, aroundish, right? So the claims that COVID vaccination in the first trimester produced a greater than 80% miscarriage rates circulating for years, they come back out again because of Fauci's phone. So origin of the statistic. Now, I'm going to throw James into the mix here. He did this research, and of course, James, should I get anything wrong, please jump in, squawk in my ear, make the beep of the smoke detector, whatever you need to do. So, somebody was saying it wasn't doubling. I had 2 YouTubes opened. Yeah, so please check your own system before you interrupt a live stream. Seems kind of important and good. Okay, so where does this data come from? Greater than 80% miscarriage rate. Now, if it was a greater than 80% miscarriage rate, the birth rate would have crashed. So miscarriage rates are 20 to 30%, much lower for younger women, much higher for older women, of course. And if there was an 84% miscarriage rate, the birth rate would have completely collapsed. So you just need to, in general, give it the smell test, right? Does it make sense that the miscarriage rate would be 84%? And I think that would be impossible to hide. There would be an absolute birth rate collapse and all kinds of things, right? So where does this data come from? It comes from 2 early data sets recalculated with a restricted denominator. Denominator, the bottom part. The first is there's a preliminary CDC VSafe Shimabukuro NEGM report from 2021. 104 miscarriages out of 827 completed pregnancies, which is a 12.6 miscarriage rate, well within the norms. Most of the live births were in women vaccinated in the 3rd trimester. Removing those left roughly 127 cases, producing 104 miscarriages out of 127 pregnancies, which is an 82% miscarriage rate, right? So just to be clear, I'm going to run through this again, make sure everyone's on the same page. So there were 104 miscarriages out of 827 completed pregnancies. Most of the live births were in women vaccinated in the 3rd trimester. Removing those left were 127 cases of first trimester, 104 out of 127, where the 82% is coming from. Pfizer's 5.3.6 post-authorization adverse event report among the small subset of reported pregnancies with known outcomes, a high proportion were losses, yielding about an 81% figure in that limited group. Naomi Wolf and the War Room / Daily Clout Pfizer Documents research team have long promoted versions of these figures. Naomi Wolf has done amazing work over the course of the pandemic. She is an amazing writer. Okay, she made the mistake about the gay guys in her books, but, not perfect, the beauty myth and so on. But she has done amazing work with the Pfizer data dumps. When the courts finally ordered Pfizer to release the data, she assembled a team of experts, and I think it was pretty much her who sort of willed this analysis of all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of documents. So she has done some amazing work when it comes to reviewing this data, which of course is almost overwhelming to any pretty much sane person. So Naomi Wolf and the War Room Daily Clout Pfizer Documents research team have long promoted versions of these figures. Wolf continues to defend the 80% plus rate as accurate, based on their analyses of the documents. So what does she say here? Come on, you can load. I feel it strongly. I feel it in my fingers. So she posted August 10th, 2 days ago. She's posted, the internet still thinks I was wrong about the 82% miscarriage rate post-mRNA vaccination, and the Pfizer Documents researchers and I were right. So she is defending that, and, no hate, no foul. I mean, obviously, if I felt I was right and so on, I would be defending that too, right? That sort of makes good sense, right? So, let me just get back here. Sorry, I lost one of my windows, but I feel it will be back. I feel strongly. It shall return. I feel it will. All right. It may not. All right, so hang tight. We'll just bring the document back. I'm sure that was me. Yeah, me. All right, let's bring that back over here. So, yes, she is defending her numbers, and we're going to dig in to see where they're coming from. Oh, all kinds of tech excitement today. There we go. All right. So, what else has she said? She said, I explained the 82% miscarriage rate in one section of the Pfizer documents as analyzed by the War Room's Daily Clout Pfizer Documents research volunteers to the European Parliament in September 2025. And we will put all of these links in because obviously this is to some degree one of the things that she has talked about. So she's written, but the Pfizer papers have charts with tens of thousands of women suffering horrific menstrual damage and 82% miscarriage. In one section of the documents, do not spread misinformation. She says these charts murder babies and destroy fertility. So in August 2026, Senators Ron Johnson and Rand Paul released text recovered from Anthony Fauci's government-issued phone. The relevant exchange from January 25th to 26, 2021 involves Fauci, then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, and Vivek Murthy. Fauci's key message, quote, I asked around a bit more. I can only do a little bit of Fauci, but I'll try. I asked around a bit more, and another issue came up that you need to be aware of. Since many people have significant cytokine storms and fever after the second dose, this theoretically could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. Walensky reported that it was definitely a good point, especially after dose 2. So that's my inner Walensky. I consider her somewhat demonic. A cytokine storm is a strong inflammatory response and not the fun kind that men get. So who's saying what? So Senator Ron Johnson has explicitly repeated the 82% calculation in interviews tied to the text release, arguing that the published 12.6% rate was misleading once third trimester vaccinations are removed from the denominator, and calling the resulting figure shocking, which of course it absolutely would be. It would just be mass murder on an almost inconceivable scale. Senator Rand Paul has focused on the discrepancy itself. Fauci privately flagged a theoretical first trimester risk linked to the cytokine fever response after the second dose, yet public messaging rapidly moved to strong reassurances that there were no red flags. Paul's stronger point is about transparency and informed consent. The private theoretical concern was not reflected in the strength of the public recommendations given to pregnant women. This, of course, to me, makes perfect sense. Hopefully it does to you. If not, call in or text and we'll figure it out. But of course, if, as is the case, Fauci was saying, it could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester, if he's saying that privately and publicly saying that pregnant women should get the COVID vax, XXX, and it's safe, that's, from a moral standpoint, I'm not a lawyer, from a moral standpoint, that is horrendous fraud. If you're expressing private concerns about the safety of the medicine or this therapeutic, if you're expressing private concerns about its safety, but publicly you're telling women to take it, it's perfectly safe. So, that is important. So, Naomi Wolf and others continued to treat the high percentage as validated by the documents. Fauci's text doesn't say, 84%, 80%. It doesn't cite any observed high rates. It raises a theoretical possibility based on known side effects of the second dose. And we're going to get into this in a sec. Larger subsequent studies and a complete follow-up of the early registries have not shown a measurable population level spike in miscarriages associated with vaccination. So what do the early numbers actually support? The high percentages are artifacts of an incomplete follow-up. Early losses appear first among completed pregnancies. Many first trimester vaccinations were still ongoing at the data cutoff, so healthy pregnancies were excluded from the denominator. Restricting after seeing outcomes inflates the rate. When the VSafe CDC registry was analyzed with more complete follow-up and proper methods, the cumulative risk of miscarriage from 6 to a little under 20 weeks was 10.8 to 14.1%. This is consistent with typical baseline rates. These updates were available from late 2021 onwards. The Pfizer 5.3.6 numbers are passive reports, not a defined cohort incidence rate. So early losses appear first among completed pregnancies. Many first trimester vaccinations were still ongoing at the data cutoff, so healthy pregnancies were excluded from the denominator. So that's important. So if the early 82% figure, 82% miscarriage rate, reflected a real and large biological effect, it should have appeared clearly in later, larger and better designed studies that followed complete pregnancies. It has not. Now, again, I fully understand, and I'm not even going to disagree with anyone who says we can't trust any of the data around COVID, the vaccinations. And I understand that. I understand that. And I'm not going to say that I've personally brain scanned every single thing and got a PhD in math, statistics, data analytics, and so on. But there are pushbacks on this 82%. And again, do your own research. Look into the data yourself if you're interested and curious, and it is pretty important data. So, key population-based results. Norway, NEJM 2021. Case control analysis of first trimester outcomes. Adjusted odds ratios for recent vaccination were 0.81 to 0.91, so there's no increased risk. Scotland, Nature Communications 2022. National matched cohort of women vaccinated from 6 weeks preconception through 19 plus 6 weeks. Adjusted odds rate for miscarriage about 1.02. Ontario, Canada. BJOG 2024, population cohort of 246,259 pregnancies. Adjusted odds ratios for remote or recent vaccination were 0.98 and 1, fully consistent with no increase, right? So what's the ratio between those who are vaccinated and those who are not vaccinated and successful pregnancies? Meta-analysis, including Human Reproduction 2023 and later reviews covering 100,000 plus to 150,000 plus women. Pooled risk ratios cluster around 1.0 to 1.07 with confidence intervals that include the baseline. Observed miscarriage rates among vaccinated women are typically in the 9 to 12% range, consistent with background rates in the general population. These studies use complete follow-up, proper denominators, and adjusted for age and other confounders. Because the other thing too, I mean, I just off the top of my head, since COVID was often considered more dangerous for older people, then it might have been older women who got more vaccinations. And if older women got more vaccinations and older women have higher rates of miscarriages just because of age and aging out of fertility and so on, then it might look like that the vaccine produces more of these terrible outcomes, right? All right. So first trimester specific data remains thinner than overall pregnancy data. Most early vaccination studies still have smaller numbers in that window, but the direction of the evidence is consistently null, right? That there's no particular difference between these things. Broader fertility effects after vaccination. And listen, just, by the by, for those of you who are new or for those of you who certainly weren't around, I absolutely viscerally and from a very base of the spinal fluid level loathed the vaccine for COVID, like with everything in my bones. I considered it absolutely horrendous, untested, and they wouldn't publish the data, and they demanded liability, and they in my view suppressed alternative treatments and alternative ways of dealing with it, because the only way to get the emergency use authorization was if there's no other ways to treat it. So I think it was a giant money grab. I think it was a horrendous risk to take, and I think it did a lot of harm in general, particularly for the young. So just this is not because I in any way, shape, or form wish to defend that horrendous monstrosity of a therapeutic, quote, therapeutic. I think it was appalling. I think it was absolutely wrong to mandate. I think it was absolutely wrong to be funded by the government. I think it was just absolutely wrong as a whole. And I do believe very strongly that the vaccine broke the Nuremberg Code in that people were coerced into treatments. They were not given full informed consent because negative effects were suppressed, and people were deplatformed. I mean, what was it? Susan Walensky, the woman who ran YouTube when I was deplatformed, she died, of course, of cancer, and her son OD'd. She personally bragged about removing millions of videos critical of the vaccines, critical of the COVID response as a whole. And so I believe that people, through being coerced, were forced into medical procedures they did not want. And coerced means like you can't have a job, you can't have a career, you can't have an income. That's pretty important, right? And you can't get informed consent, like as a friend of mine pointed out, like the inserts are all blank. You can't get informed consent if the thousands of possible dangerous side effects were simply suppressed and doctors weren't told about them, the media didn't broadcast them, and so on. So I am absolutely zero friend of that horrendous shot. But of course, we strive for accuracy. And with any luck, I think we're going to aim for that and hopefully achieve that today. So broader fertility effects after vaccination. So looking beyond pregnancies that were already underway, the question is whether vaccination itself impairs the ability to conceive or raises miscarriage risk in subsequent pregnancies. Among recognized pregnancies, the overall miscarriage rate is roughly 10 to 15% in women in their 20s and early 30s. It rises with age. At 45 and above, miscarriage rate is 50%, 30 to 40% at 40 to 44, 15 to 20% at 35 to 39, and about 10% at ages 25 to 29. Please, 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 please have your children young. I say this as a guy who had a kid at 41. It's not ideal. I mean, we had a kid as soon as nature would allow us, but it was not ideal. And please, please, please have your kids young. You got more energy. You bounce back from lack of sleep a lot easier, and so on. I mean, my daughter, 41. I have a kid at 41. Yeah, kind of. So 42. No, I think I was 42. My God, I should know this. Anyway, so the point is I was able, even in my early 40s, and I'm pretty fittish, right? But I was able to run around after my daughter and climb around and chase her around, and I didn't really feel it. And I was over at a friend's place the other day who's got a bunch of little kids, and I was like, I'm like, I play good monster, chase after the kids and get them. The only way that I can catch them is if I make them laugh so hard they fall over. But I was like, man, I mean, my daughter's almost 18, so, it's almost 18 years ago. Of course, I was, 17 years ago, whatever, that I started chasing her around. And, man, I feel it. I feel the difference. Like, so for your grandkids and all of that, the later you have your kids, the less time you have with your grandkids. So absolutely just try and have your kids young. I'm begging you. It's way better for them. It's way better for you. It's just good, toasty and tasty all round. Okay. So the vaccine figures, 10%, 15 to 20%, 30 to 40%, 50% at 45 and above. These figures come from large population registries, are the baseline against which any vaccine-related change must be judged. Fecundability. Fecundability. Sounds like Hyannis Katsky. In the prospective Presto cohort of couples actively trying to conceive, female partner vaccination had a fecundity ratio of 1.08. Male partner vaccination, fecundity ratio of 0.95. A fertility ratio, I should have mentioned fecundity ratio, fertility ratio basically, of 1 means no different from the unvaccinated group. The confidence intervals both include 1.0, so there's no evidence of reduced per cycle probability of pregnancy after vaccination of either partner. Miscarriage risk after vaccination. There's a 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis. Pooled data from 21 studies covering about 150,000 women. Pooled miscarriage rate among vaccinated women was 9%. Risk ratio versus unvaccinated or placebo, risk ratio of 1.07. So that's tiny, right? That's a tiny change. A separate Presto analysis of preconception vaccination found an incidence rate ratio for miscarriage of 0.85 among women vaccinated before conception compared with those who were not. Across these studies, the odds ratios sit very close to 1.0, indicating no difference. The confidence intervals are consistent with no meaningful increase. Lastly, the absolute rates among vaccinated women remain in the same 9 to 12% range that is expected from background age-related risk. In short, the extreme early percentage does not survive later scrutiny, and population-level data on both miscarriage after early pregnancy vaccination and overall fertility after vaccination do not show a measurable harmful effect on the size originally claimed earlier, sort of 82% or whatever, right? Modest residual uncertainty remains on the thinnest first trimester strata and on very long-term outcomes, but the large signals required by the 80% plus narrative are absent. Absent. And why is this important? Look, I don't want to get off on a whole rant here, but my feelings about those who took the vaccine, maybe I'm alone in this. I don't think so, but maybe. My feelings about those who took the vaccine are mixed. It's hard for those of us who get involved in alternate understandings, alternate media, critical, skeptical, rational, empirical. Like, it's hard for us to understand what it's like to be semi-locked in a room with CNN driving you rapidly insane. I don't watch mainstream news. I find it repulsive. It makes my skin crawl. It's a whole bunch of con men and con women in ornate makeup and spider powder hair just lying to people in order to destabilize society. It's like going back and looking at old newsreels of Soviet achievements. We've doubled pig iron production. It is absolutely repulsive. I would rather somebody sneeze blood into my face than watch any particular chunk of the mainstream media. But, of course, most people, especially the older people, especially the boomers, well, they sit and let the programming program them. They think that Trump is a rapist, that Trump was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. They think that Jean Ann Carroll's absurd allegations are somehow true. I don't think they are, to put it mildly. But they think he's an emperor. They think that he's dismantling the republic. Like they think all of this. In the Matrix. They're in the Matrix. They think that calling it the China virus is racist because, when you get goods from China and they say made in racist, that's like they think this. They think this stuff. They don't know. They don't know. What was it today? Do I have this right? I should probably try and get this right. I think I have this right. Let me get her name. Like they don't know things. They just don't know things. And we can get mad at them for not knowing things. And I certainly do. But they don't. They don't know things. I mean, I get ignorance of the law is no excuse. I get all of that. But they just don't know things. They don't know that the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, definitely went after me for many years and still have. Their page up, the Southern Poverty Law Center's chief financial officer, Heidi Berich. This is the indictment. I think she just got arrested. There's an indictment. Yeah, she just got arrested. This is from Technofog. He summarized it. She dated/lived with a neo-Nazi and used donor funds laundered through a fake company to enrich them both. She created fake companies to launder donor money to hate groups and structured transactions to avoid oversight. Absolutely corrupt, evil, and amoral, if true. I'm pretty sure it's true, but innocent until proven guilty, right? We know all of that, right? These are just charges. We give people the benefit of the doubt, even if it makes us throw up a little bit in our cheekbones. But they don't know things. People who are trapped in the mainstream media, they don't know things at all. And of course, as we know, the mainstream media, brought to you by Pfizer. I mean, they're largely paid by these horrendously corrupt organizations and all of that. So some people, saying you can't have a job or a career or a license if you don't take this shot, which everyone's telling you is safe and effective, and only crazy people and tinfoil hat wearing people think there could be anything wrong with them and they're going to kill grandma, and like boom, boom, boom. I mean, we can say, gee, people shouldn't be susceptible to propaganda, but if they weren't susceptible to propaganda, there'd be no propaganda. Propaganda works. It works. And I have mixed feelings. I have some sympathy for people who their feet were held to the fire and they couldn't have a job and they couldn't do this and some people have to travel for their work and they couldn't travel. So I have some sympathy, when it's the carrot and the stick, right? The stick is you can't have a life if you don't take this or an income. And the carrot is, and you don't want to be like those extreme right-wing, paranoid, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists, and you want to trust the experts and trust the science, and you're going to save grandma, and you're going to get people sick and killed if you don't, blah, 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 blah. Even though it seems like the 6 feet apart rule was in part put in to make sure that people wouldn't achieve herd immunity before they could pump billions of dollars of this crap into people's veins. So people don't know stuff. And they don't know that they don't know stuff, and they think that they do know stuff. Now, of course, if people hadn't complied, then I wouldn't have had to dodge like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix these shots, right? I mean, again, one day I will tell the story of all the absolute shitestorm that I went through and my family went through to dodge this stuff because, well, Canada got a little frisky with that. I felt like Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. The bullets just went all the way around, and now I've got to Wonder the World Havoc Adventures. Anyway, it's just wild. All right, so birth rates as a rough proxy. A large sustained first trimester effect, right, if this is 82% miscarriage rate. So this large first trimester effect should appear in monthly births about 9 months later. What do the numbers show? Well, in Germany and Sweden, Mass first dose enrollment peaked April to June 2021. There was a sharp total fertility rate drop in January to March 2022 births 9 months later. Germany fell from 1.58 in December 21 to 1.42 to 1.43 in January to April 2022, roughly 10%. Sweden fell from 1.7 in 2021 to 1.5 to 1.6 in early 2022, about 10%. Israel received one of the earliest rollouts. Vaccine eligibility for reproductive age women opened January to February to 2021. The birth dip appeared October to November 2021. Statistically clear negative association 9 months after campaign started in the Nordics, Germany, Netherlands, UK, Italy, Poland, and Israel. Dips were real but temporary in many places. Partial rebound around June 2022 was documented in Germany, Austria, Hungary, Denmark, Finland, Poland, Ireland, and Greece. Only 4 of 22 countries ended below the pre-pandemic trend. Most simply returned closer to the long-term downward trajectory. So, yes, there were dips in the birth rates. No question. The first, what is it? The first is miscarriage caused by the vaccine. That's there's 2 main possible explanations, right? It's not one I tend towards, but the first is miscarriage caused by the vaccine. The other, what else could have happened, is couples postponing conception at the start of vaccination campaigns. The 9-month lag from peak first dose months, the moderate reduction in birth rates, and the partial recoveries fit postponement more than they do vaccine injury. Right? So why would couples postpone conception at the start of vaccination campaigns? Well, because if you need to be vaccinated in order to get good health care, then you're not going to get pregnant in case you need health care until you're vaccinated. So that delay, and there could be other reasons as well, but that would be, or given that people were being told about long COVID and the COVID brain fog and all of this kind of stuff, then people may say, well, I don't want to get pregnant before I get vaccinated because maybe the vaccine is going to save me from negative effects of COVID. And that's what people were told, right? So it's also worth noting that official guidance from CDC, ACOG, and similar bodies did not require a lengthy delay on the order of weeks or months between vaccination and attempting conception. Any contribution from post-vaccination waiting is more likely to reflect short-term side effect recovery or personal caution during the campaign period rather than formal medical waiting interval. We also have to note that a known miscarriage usually involves both physical recovery and emotional processing. Many couples, probably most, but many couples do not immediately resume trying to conceive after a miscarriage. A first trimester miscarriage rate on the order of the over 80% claims would therefore be expected to produce a deeper and more sustained trough in births rather than the relatively sharp but temporary dips followed by partial rebound that were observed. A modest contribution from higher miscarriage rates is not ruled out by aggregate birth numbers, but an effect large enough to drive the bulk of the observed dips is harder to reconcile with the shape, depth, and recovery of the curves. Hello, people watching on YouTube. Hello. It's good to be back. I haven't changed a bit. Oh, wait, I wear glasses now. Well, anyway. Okay, so if the vaccine caused an 82% miscarriage rate, well, the vaccine the spikes don't leave the body, right? Oh, it's going to stay localized. No, didn't it show up? I think it was a Japanese study where the spikes showed up deep in the ovaries and stuff like that. And I'm not a big fan of the spikes, don't get me wrong. But how would it recover? Right? How would the numbers bounce back if it was like some permanent alteration and now it's 80+% going forward? So, Naomi Wolf has discussed lower birth rates in several posts. She wrote, a study of national data from the Czech Republic shows that the birth rate was approximately 30% lower among women vaccinated with COVID-19 compared to women who were not. She also wrote, new study links COVID-19 vaccination to lower birth rates in Czech women. Birth rates dropped a third in the Czech Republic and so on. These come from the Manish et al. Paper using national Czech data, and this reported that rates of successful conceptions leading to live births were substantially lower among women who had been vaccinated before conception than among unvaccinated women, on the order of 30% lower or about 1.5 times higher rates among the unvaccinated in some periods. This has not been demonstrated in other countries, with a counterexample from a large Swedish registry studied. Adjusted hazard ratio for childbirth 1.03, essentially no difference. Adjusted hazard ratio for recorded miscarriages 0.86, again, consistent with no increase and, if anything, slightly lower. Now, of course, it's important to remember any vaccinated versus unvaccinated comparison of birth rates is vulnerable to selection effects, right? So if you've been around for a while, you know that I talk to not a tiny number of lost souls. And I say this with great sympathy and great empathy. I love that people call.freedomain.com. And don't forget to get your tickets at wordwarddebate.com to see me next month on September 12th. I'd love to meet you. Genuinely love to give you a hug. So if I were to say the vast majority of people have significant issues with their parents, right? I mean, I'm known as the, to some degree, talk to me about your parents guy. And because I'm one of the few people willing to have, important and public conversations about moral issues with parents. So a lot of people who have issues with their parents call me. A lot of people who seem a little bit lost, they have a failure to launch, they're kind of stalled in their 20s or 30s or sometimes even older. So that's a selection effect, right? It would be like I wouldn't want to sit there and say, well, this is everyone. People say, oh my God, the people who, Steph's listeners are going through a lot of problems. It's like, well, the people who call, yes, it's like a doctor saying, why is everyone sick in the world? Everyone around me is sick. It's like, you're the doctor. So the selection effect is really, really important to figure out. So women who remained unvaccinated often differ enormously in age, parity, socioeconomic status, health attitudes, and fertility intentions. The Czech analysis is largely descriptive, does not fully resolve those differences. Later Czech demographic work has also suggested that some of the apparent divergence reflects pre-existing differences in reproductive timing and behavior between the two groups, rather than a direct biological effect of the vaccine. So, a friend of a friend of a friend grew up in Poland and was older and remembered communism. And she protested like crazy against vaccines because she was old enough to remember communism. And what was it? I think I said that the final variant is communism. The final variant of COVID is communism. And so if you were old enough to remember the horrendous medical stuff that was forced upon people under communism, then you're less likely to get vaccinated, but you're probably also too old to have a baby. So again, you just got to take this kind of stuff into account. So there are high-profile cases as well. Personal stories can shape public perception more powerfully than registry data. Yeah, do you remember all of this? Like, Bob decided not to get the vaccine, and now Bob is dead. All of these, he's leaving 4 children behind, a weeping wife. Like, just horrendous stuff. So personal stories, they shape things. So Bill Ackman recently stated that he and his wife, Neri, experienced 7 miscarriages while trying for a second child during COVID, after which the time ran out. This is a painful private loss. Of course, we sympathize. It's a terrible situation. To experience 7 miscarriages is appalling. But Neri Oxman was born in 1976 and was in her mid to late 40s during the main pandemic years. Background miscarriage risk rises sharply with maternal age, roughly 1/3 at 40 to 44 and over half at 45 and above. This is chromosomal issues in aging eggs. Now, male sperm also decays over time, just it doesn't fall off a cliff in the way that female eggs do. Now, I want an omelet. Multiple consecutive losses while attempting pregnancy in your mid to late 40s are tragic, but they're also consistent, sadly, with the well-documented age-related increase in risk. Their first child was born successfully in 2019 when Neri Oxman was 42 to 43. So, that's important as well. So high-profile anecdotes can spread quickly and get folded into larger narratives. Age is one of the strongest predictors of miscarriage we have. It has to be taken into account before treating any individual case as evidence of a vaccine-driven signal. I'll tell you why this is really important and why I'm going to take credit for all of James's work, except for the stuff that's incorrect. It's all James. It's all James, that stuff. But I'll tell you why it's so important in a second. So, in closing, it does appear that the over 80% calculations do not hold up. Larger studies focused on early pregnancy vaccination have not shown a clear elevated risk. Birth rate patterns are more consistent with behavioral delay than a massive first trimester biological effect. At the same time, right, balance things out, the early pregnancy data was thin. Thus, the safe for pregnancy messaging was based on no real actual data, which eroded trust in institutions, if not destroying it for some, thank God. The mainstream messaging and subsequent dehumanizing of the hesitant and the skeptics is something that the unvaccinated will not soon forget. And if you want the sources for all of what we're talking about here, you can go to fdrurl.com/vaccine-miscarriage. Vaccine-miscarriage. Miscarriage, I think, doesn't really matter the case. It's lowercase here. So why does this matter? Why? Why does this matter? And you see we have a caller. I'll get to you in a sec. Thank you for your patience. So it matters because if my listeners, I love you all so much. I really do. I feel warmth, paternal protection and affection and so on. I also know a lot of you didn't get vaccinated for this thing. Some of you did. Now, if people believe the 82% miscarriage rate for vaccinated women, there's going to be some women among my listeners who say the risk is too high and won't try to get pregnant. Bad idea, ladies. Bad idea. Bad idea. Pushing a high catastrophic vaccination doom scenario for pregnancy is just another depopulation agenda, my friends. Come on, it's everywhere, and it's always from the same kinds of people, right? The leftists and the communists and the people who hate the West and blah, 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 blah. So my listeners, I know some of you got vaccinated. I sympathize. A lot of times there were some people who just, they just ran off a cliff and took my freedoms with them and a lot of money and all of that. Okay, I have problems with them. That's not my listeners. So if you're listening to this, don't believe that 82%. Go forth and multiply. Have some babies. If you got vaccinated, you didn't get sterilized. You didn't get irradiated. Your womb was not turned into some spiky, prickly desert of doom. Go forth and multiply and don't believe this terrible hype. All right. So we thank you, James. I'm just going to, James, is there anything that you wanted to mention over and above what it is that I said or anything that I got egregiously wrong? Don't forget to unmute if you want to say anything. If you don't want to say anything, just tell me you don't want to say anything. I'll move on to the caller.
No worries. I wanted to offer the, okay, so what else, what were the alternative explanations for the Czech, dip, like the non-recovery of the Czech population? And it has a lot, demographers in Czechia, they basically point to overall trends that were existing beforehand. We've already mentioned like age structure and, who was born when. Your example of the woman who was very against the vaccination, but remembered communism, so she was too old.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but also, so I just asked you, but the thought that struck me is if the birth rates are declining and you just take that one slice and you say, oh my gosh, they went down 5% year over year or 10% year over year, but you got to compare to how they were falling before because we know that the birth rates are falling all over the place.
Right. So there's the second point, economic uncertainty and housing, which is, increasing. Actually did really research on that today. I'm not sure if we're going to get to it, but there's also continued postponement of first births, which again, it's the same pattern. People are having babies later and later and later, which of course increases the risk of miscarriage. In particular, for the Czech Republic, war-related uncertainty because they're pretty close to Ukraine. And so that would have hit Czech public sentiment harder than, for example, in the U.S. and Canada, we're very far away. I mean, we're not unaffected, but we're not next door,
Yeah, we don't smell the smoke of the bodies, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I understand it's not bordering, but that's fine. Uh, and then, again, broader value and lifestyle shifts, education, career, personal freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I had something else I wanted to mention around that. I also asked a question of what was the, were the, were the, what was the proportion of the population of Czechia that was vaccinated, and it's roughly
Sorry,
around
Czechia or
65.
Czechoslovakia? I might
Yeah,
completely.
sorry, it's Czechia, and you know what? Grok went back and forth between it's Czechia or Czech Republic.
Czech Republic,
Czechoslovakia
yeah,
was,
Czechoslovakia
yeah,
is like long gone, right? But okay, sorry.
yeah, yeah. So I'll say Czech Republic to be consistent. So what was the proportion of people who were vaccinated in Czech Republic? Around 65, 66%. And I was like, of the unvaccinated population, what makes up that proportion? I was thinking first. I was thinking like just migrants, essentially that were largely unvaccinated, right? Um, it turns out that about 10% of the Czech Republic is foreign born, but and we don't have numbers to substantiate this. It's sort of like a what if, sort of just so story in a way, but it could potentially explain slightly higher rates among the unvaccinated. Lower rates of miscarriages among the unvaccinated. There were a lot of people that came from Ukraine, and Ukraine was generally speaking lower in terms of vaccination
Oh,
rates.
so people
Now,
fleeing the war, and people fleeing the war probably aren't about to have babies because they're just fleeing a war, right? And of course, a lot of it is
sure,
women fleeing the war because the men weren't allowed to leave, and they're not just about to start meeting some guy in the new country and immediately start pumping out the babies. So there's a lot of things around that.
yeah, there's a lot of different variables. I mean, that's okay, maybe more vaccinated, but they're not like you said, not about to come, do babies and stuff. But uh, yeah. So basically, the alternative explanation to is sort of countering Naomi's Naomi Wolf's saying, "Oh, this was a 30% decline." And there's all these other demographic factors already in play. There's the potential of the unvaccinated just being in a different place in life. Maybe they're younger. Because about 30% of women, roughly speaking, of childbearing age didn't get the vaccine.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so again, this one didn't have hard numbers. I didn't get the chance to put this into the presentation in a really nice compact format. But I also did want to add that, and I also wanted to note, although after hearing what you have to say about, particularly the scare factor of the 80%, I was like, I was looking at Naomi's posts. I'm like, man, she's not back down from this at all. She's really pushing it. And I'm like, I don't want her to be right, but I almost kind of feel bad if she's wrong. Like,
No, don't feel bad. If she's wrong, and I think she
yeah,
is at this point, and I
yeah,
defer to Naomi Wolf on a lot of this sort of stuff because she's run the data, but
yeah.
she is coming from the left hard, and
Mm,
leftists like fear mongering Christians and others to not have kids. I mean, I'm not saying that's her motive. I don't know. Obviously, I can't read her mind,
mm.
but the left pushing fears of babies and pregnancies and childbirth and so on is not unknown, to put it mildly.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, with that context, then I don't feel quite as bad about that. But at first, it's like she did a whole lot of great work. But hey, people can be wrong. But it was a bit disappointing to see that she's not backing down at all from it. Even when it's like, no, I mean, if you look at the birth rates, I mean, because I'm like, I also asked Brock the question, hey, has anyone done the birth rate thing? Because that seems kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And the only thing that was sort of a novel twist on it was saying, okay, look at the number of months, and just talk about the curves and the recovery rate of the birth rates. And it's like, yeah, this doesn't track. 80% doesn't track. The miscarriage rate does not track with what actually happened. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to add on that. Yeah,
All right. Well,
thanks very
thank
much.
you. Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
that. And
All right.
this another. This is Naomi Wolf in her 29 book Outrages, Sex, Censorship, and the Criminalization of Love. So she had a huge error in that. It involved misinterpreting historical records about the prosecution and supposed execution of men for homosexual acts in Victorian Britain. In the book, based on her Oxford doctoral work on poet John Addington Symonds and related legal history, Wolfe claimed to have found evidence of several dozen executions of men, including teenagers, for same-sex sex after 1857, well into the Victorian era. She argued this showed intensified persecution that would have terrified figures like Simons, and that the last executions for sodomy occurred later than commonly thought. The accepted last hanging for sodomy in Britain was of James Pratt and John Smith in 1835. So during a May 29 BBC Radio 3 Free Thinking interview promoting the book, historian and presenter Matthew Sweet challenged her on air. He pointed out that the Old Bailey notation, that's a court notation, death recorded, which Wolfe took as evidence of actual execution, was a legal category created in 1823. It allowed judges to record a capital conviction while recommending a pardon/commutation instead of carrying out the death sentence. Sweet stated he could find no evidence of any executions for sodomy in Victorian Britain matching her claims, and that none of the specific cases she identified as executions had actually resulted in hanging. Additional issues raised then and later included sodomy in the records was a broad legal term covering not only consensual adult male same-sex acts, but also child sexual abuse and bestiality. Some cases Wolfe cited as examples of persecution of gay men or intimate relationships involved assaults on children, e.g. a 14-year-old charged in connection with a 6-year-old boy or other non-consensual acts. Historians such as Sweet and Fern Riddle argued that certain examples continue to blur these distinctions even in this revised version, misrepresenting the nature of the offenses. Naomi Wolfe acknowledged the death-recorded misreading as an error, calling the two specific pages involved collectible in the first printing. Thanked Sweet for the correction and said it would be fixed. She maintained that the broader thesis about legal and cultural hostility towards same-sex intimacy held, describing the book as a cultural analysis of mood rather than pure demographic or social science investigation, and so on, right? So this is important. This episode is frequently cited as a notable factual blunder in Wolfe's career. The last confirmed execution for sodomy in Britain predate the bulk of the Victorian period. She emphasized, and death recorded did not equate to carried out hangings, and of course, sodomy included childhood abuse of course, a sexual nature, and so on. Now, of course, stretching the truth to attack Christian society from the left, stretching the truth to defend gay people who reliably vote for the left, and so on, and leftist fetish with gay people, is quite significant. So I'm just saying look, nobody has to be perfect. Like, I'm the last guy to say everyone has to be perfect. You can't. I've made mistakes before, but if she says, here's the data to prove my thesis, and the data is largely disproven, and then she says, well, the book is still valid because it's talking about mood, but that's just wrong. That's just wrong. So, all right. Well, thank you, James. Appreciate that. And James is single. If the ladies want to send him a message, support@freedomain.com. And don't forget, Word War Debate. To sign up for your tickets. They're going to be gone very, very soon. All right. To the caller, thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. Koponios. Should we speak to each other in fluent Greek?
No, not at all.
All right.
English will do. Speaking of pandemics, yes. Do you believe that we have a sort of sex pandemic going on in society? So, hyper promiscuity, hypersexuality, especially with teenagers, lack of commitment in relationships, monogamy being out of fashion, open marriages, poly relationships, open relationships, all about stuff. Do you think as a society we've kind of lost touch and a kind of more old school traditional mindset? Do you think in 15 or 20 years it's all just going to get out of hand?
Sorry, in 15 or 20 years, what do you mean?
This is just a hypothetical. Do you think in the future we will digress as a society and get more hypersexualized and start being more, derogatory?
No. I mean, the one thing that's almost always certain in human society is the pendulum swing. So from the 60s onwards, again, this is part of the depopulation agenda. So the depopulation agenda sells you sexual pleasure in exchange for fertility. So you can have a lot of sex free condoms in schools, and you can get treatments for your STDs from the government or from Medicare or Medicaid or whatever. Right? And so they offer you sexual gratification without fertility. Now, sexual gratification is enormously high, particularly for men. Of course,
This is the
women.
60s. This is the 60s, right? This is 60s?
I'm sorry?
Is this the 60s that you're referring to?
Well, 60s and onwards,
Specifically?
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Because I made the argument that, sorry to interrupt. I made the argument that it's more to do with social media now and idealism and, you know, the media and music and that kind of stuff.
well, okay,
more
but
than,
hang on. Let me get there. I want to jump 4 decades all at
Sorry,
once,
go
right?
on.
So let me give you a little thesis here.
Yeah, no worries.
So when you got the pill, you got the separation of sexuality and fertility. Now, of course, we evolved, and men in particular evolved, with enormously high sex drives and being very visual creatures. And men have enormously high sex drives that women are supposed to channel into hard work and the provision and protection of an actual family, right? So men is like these massive tsunamis of sexual desire, and women are supposed to sort of tame it and channel it towards being a father, being a productive member of society. And so you got sex in return for getting married, and you got married and you had kids, and so the thunderous Mount Vesuvius, old faithful eruption of male sexuality was channeled by a female willpower and crossing their legs. You know, like the cheapest form of birth control is a dime, like the woman just holds it between her knees. And so when sexuality was separated from reproduction, everybody went insane. It would be like consequence-free cocaine, right? People would just go nuts on it. Now, then, of course, what happened was when men had a lot of sex with women, women choose to have sex with the most attractive men, right? This is the home math thing. I'm sure everyone's seen that chart, right? So what happened was women started to become harems of high-value men, and there's sort of the sentiment among some women, which is I would rather be, you know, an alpha male's F toy than a beta's wife or something like that. And what happened was, of course, women then had to be lured into the workforce as part of all of this, because once they're having sex but not babies, then they want to live like men. They want to go into the workforce. And so with all of this, women would still get pregnant, right? It's not like if you have sex, even if you're using birth control, you can still get pregnant. So women started to get pregnant, but without any commitment. And because women got pregnant without any commitment, you needed a welfare state. And so you put the welfare state in. And once you put the welfare state in, the parents of the women were no longer invested in making sure the women got married before they had sex. Because in the past, if the woman had sex without being married and the guy took off, then the parents would have to deal with the resulting pregnancy, whether they sent her away if they were wealthy to some procedure in Switzerland, or whether they just pretended that there was a late oopsie from the mom, or they would have to find some way to deal with it and raise that child as their own. And so because it was 20 years of additional labor, if their kid got pregnant out of wedlock, there was an absolute need for a welfare state. Once the welfare state came in, parents stopped caring about female sexuality in very large ways, and so on. And so people became sex addicts, because sexual addiction is supposed to take place inside a marriage, right? I mean, men are addicted to sex and women are addicted to security. And you were supposed to trade. You can have sex with me if you provide security and provide for the children. Go ahead.
So what about gay men? So what about gay men?
What
So
about
you've
gay
got
men?
you've got the men, which are, so you said women are security and men are just hypersex.
Sorry, why would we talk about gay men in terms of
because
reproduction and children?
No, I'm talking about sex as a whole. I'm talking about.
But they're two completely different categories. Have you spent much time around the gay culture?
Well, yes, I'm gay myself.
You're gay yourself. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so that's why you want to talk about gay issues. All right, that's fine. So
no, not particularly. I just wanted to interject and say the dynamic between two men, you know, because you've got two men which are very different to women, are just very differently hardwired. Women, you know, they seek security, but men are just, when you have two gay men or two gay women, you know, it's a very different dynamic. And yeah, just wanted to say
it's
that.
a very different dynamic. That's your big analysis of it.
Well, yeah. No.
Okay, first of all, gay men are horny, and lesbian bed death is a very well-known phenomenon, as is the shocking amounts of violence in lesbian relationships, by the way. I mean, people talk about male violence, but the most violent place to be for any person really is in a lesbian relationship because they're unbelievably violent and kind of asexual a lot of times. So with gay men, of course, prior to AIDS, of course, gay men would have fairly consequence-free sex. And it seemed that for a lot of gay men, as you know, there was no ceiling other than the need to sleep and occasionally go to the bathroom to the cap on sexual partners, right? That the sexual partnership hookup culture for males, particularly when they're young, gay males, is extraordinarily high because it was
Yeah.
relatively consequence-free, at least until AIDS. And now, of course, with the new medications to prevent infection from AIDS, the STD rates among the gay male population are going through the roof again, and you're starting to get this wild promiscuity again. And so it's not great.
It's why I don't use I don't agree with hookup culture. Going back to the whole sex pandemic thing, I think the whole hookup culture is just disgusting, and I think it's getting out of hand, to be honest.
Well,
I
and
mean,
it's frankly quite dangerous for society as a whole, right?
yeah.
Because it's not like all of the ailments and problems stay contained entirely within the gay community. And it would be nice. Scott Thompson of Kids in the Hall
What's
used to talk
interesting is
about this.
gay.
Hang on. Scott
Sorry.
Thompson of Kids in the Hall used to talk about this, that it would be nice if there were more gay men who would talk out very strongly against hookup culture. I know there are some gay men who do it, but it would be much to the benefit of the reputation of gay people in society as a whole if the numbers for straight men, the numbers are incomprehensible unless you're like a rock star. Like the numbers of gay partnerships, and of course it's not all gay men and blah 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 blah. But I mean, I had gay roommates when I was a couple of times over the course of my life, and I remember the stories. Like, hey, this guy called up, it was the wrong number. He came over, we had sex. Hey, this is my boyfriend. We met. Oh no, we had sex, we met, we introduced each other, and then we went on a date. And it's like, that's kind of incomprehensible for people who are not gay. And again, I'm not saying that's all gay relationships. Of course, there's a lot of gay marriages and a lot of stable gay relationships. But yeah, another two men that I lived with who were gay, they would go out dressed up in their disco bondage Freddie Mercury leather gear, and they'd come home with different partners every night. Sorry, go ahead.
It's why I don't do the whole LGBT parade stuff. I'm completely indifferent towards it. I think it's just a horrendous public exhibitionism. It's not my scene at all. And I think, it's just, I don't do that. I think it's horrible.
Right.
And I think it's worse with, I think with gay men and trans people, whatever, it's definitely more out of hand in that aspect, I think.
Yeah.
There's definitely too much of it going on, especially with you've got like people in leather assless chaps, whatever you call them, walking around naked, and you've got kids. I mean, it's just fucking mental.
I certainly do not think that it's an appropriate place in public to have leather-faced dog fetishists and
No, not at all.
butts and balls hanging out.
And I have nothing against with fetishes or BDSM culture. As long as it's in a discreet, safe space, and people, as long as people consent, you can do whatever you want in the bedroom. But it's just this obsession with, oh, I do this, I do that. Going out in public and just not giving a shit about the consequences. It's
Well, it's multilegalism, because if straight people tried the same thing, they'd be arrested. So I'm a big one for like equal under the law.
Absolutely. It's like you got topless. It's like men can be topless, but women can't be topless.
Well, that's a little different, because a woman's nipples are also erogenous, right? Whereas a man's nipples is all taps and no planning.
As a gay man, I could definitely tell you there's not much difference. You can get the same amount of turn on from looking at a pair of tits and a 6-pack chest. So I respectfully disagree.
On the receiving end, it's a little different, though. I mean, the male nipple has much less nerve endings.
It's not just the nipples, man.
The breast is not just the nipples. Yes, thank you, Dr. Spock, for that lesson in biology. I understand that. I don't just have a pair of nipples floating above my pecs. I get that, for sure. So, yeah, as far as sex addicts go, a lot of socialized medicine and the welfare state and so on, and even old age pensions, are there to support sexual addiction, right? So people who are sex addicts will have a lot of sex, but they won't actually have children. And so because they spend a lot of money on primping and preening, this isn't just gay, this is straight as well, right? But primping and preening and dating, and like, it's all just wildly expensive, especially for men these days. And so people blow, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on dating rather than saving for their retirement. So you need old age pensions. People get a lot of STDs. And I think it was like, is it half of black women have herpes? Like, it's nuts, right? So a lot of people get STDs from sleeping around, and then, they don't want to spend that money on themselves. There's a lot of out of pregnancy wedlocks, of course. And then you need a welfare state, and then you need the government to go after men for child support and things like that. So there's a whole legal and redistributive structure that has to kind of come into the vacuum of healthy pair bonded sexual
Well, do you think we've got enough
procreative
testing?
relationships.
Do you think as a society we're not are we encouraged or not encouraged enough to go to do testing when it comes to STDs? I feel like the whole process in where I live in the UK it's not easy.
It's
in my
not easy
experience.
to get tested for STDs.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's not as simple as walking in sometimes.
Yeah, I can't possibly tell you what is or isn't possible or recommended. I mean, obviously, I think if you've slept around, or if you have, even if you've had one relationship, but unless she was a virgin, then you should go and get tested before you get into new relationships, for sure, because you don't want to be unknowingly
But are people?
spreading.
I'm trying to say, are people educated enough about this? Is the government doing enough to talk about it?
Well, I mean,
STDs?
I don't know what happens in England, but I know that in Canada, we had a lot of, quote, sex ed, which was a lot about STDs and all of that. And it was actually really repulsive. At one point, I had to just get up and leave. I just found it like, I won't even get into what they were talking about. It was just gross. So, yeah, I mean, kids do get educated about this stuff in schools, at least they used to. And I'm sure it's probably even more now. All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention? It's a great topic. I appreciate it.
No, that'll be it.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Nice to chat about these topics. Yeah, I mean, sex is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly bonding, and with the right person in the right context, I mean, it makes up for taxes. Like, taxes suck, but as an adult, you have to pay taxes, but you also get sex. So with the right person, it can be just one of the most amazing and beautiful and exciting and fun and obviously sexy experiences in life. With the wrong people, and in particular for women, if you give up sex to try and get a man or to try and get a relationship, it's really depressing. They don't call it the walk of shame for nothing, right? This is a woman sort of coming back from some guy's place. One of her heels broken. She's staggering along in her club clothes on a bleary Sunday morning. And when it goes right, it's one of the greatest things in life. When it goes wrong, it's really one of the worst things in life. And like all pleasures, if you get too much too soon, it costs you. It's like cocaine, or steroids. If you get too much too soon, it costs you a lot later. Like, steroids give you big muscles, and then what you get, roid rages and heart problems or things like that, right? So be very wary in life as a whole of jumping out of our evolution. And also, if it seems too good to be true, it almost certainly is. And consequence-free sex is one of the ultimate demonic depopulation offers out there in the world. And when people said, well, you can have basically as much sex as you want without consequences, what happened, of course, as we know from women as a whole, is that women end up, in general, sharing a small number of top-tier men. All the other men have to make do with video games and pornography, and it does not end very well at all. Because, I mean, the purpose of women, I don't say the purpose like existential, the biological purpose or the mating strategy for women used to be pretty clear, right? I mean, you in the full flush of your youth and beauty, 18 to 21 or whatever, and you're supposed to try and get a guy who's going to commit to you for the rest of your life. And that means if you aim too high, right? If you're a 5 and you aim for an 8, If you're a 5 woman, you aim for an 8 guy, he's going to reject you because he's looking for an 8. Right? So then maybe you'll go for a 7, try that for a while. Maybe you'll have a bit more luck, but you can't really get to lock him down. A 6, blah, blah, blah. But then when you start to, like, you feel depressed if you think you deserve an 8. And of course, a woman who's a 5 can get an 8 if she'll offer up sex. But if it requires lifelong commitment, if it requires marriage, she can't get the 8. So then she has to settle down. Then by the time she gets to 5, if she's tried 8, 7, 6, by the time she gets to 5, she's depressed and rolling her eyes and has cocktail eyes, like looking all over the place for someone better. And the guy's kind of insulted and annoyed. And also, because the 5 looks and says, well, you've kind of been throwing yourself at all these other guys. You're not really that attractive to me. And so he may not even date her because she aimed too high for too long and tried all these other guys. And that shows to men, like men, for women don't really understand this, but men, one of the things we're fantastic at, I mean, we're good at a lot of stuff, frankly, but one of the things we're fantastic at is female delusion. Female delusion. And the reason we're really good at figuring out female delusion is because if you, as a man, get married to a woman with delusions of grandeur, you will spend the rest of your life in a steaming shite pile of boiling misery. You will. My mother, it's been a while since you've talked about Mummy Dearest. My mother, I mean, slender, very pretty, and maybe even beautiful. It's hard for me to tell, right? But, because I could see the inside. But my mother truly believed that if it wasn't for my brother and I, she would have been strolling the red carpet and hobnobbing with Clark Gable and I don't know, maybe Dustin Hoffman or I don't know, like Humphrey Bogart. She believed that she would be at, laughing like Blanche Dubois levels of almost catastrophic delusion. And because I'm citing my mother as an example, there's lots of women out there like this, but as a man, if the woman has far too high a view of herself, she's going to cheat. Because if a woman who's a 5, but she thinks she's a 9, then she might end up settling to marry a 5 or a 6, but she's going to believe that she really deserves an 8 or a 9. So she's really going to have one eye out the door. She's going to be discontented. She's going to be cranky. She's going to be irritable and naggy and blah, 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 because, boy, she really believes that's what she deserves. Like if you've ever been a boss, right? If you, as I've said before, I interviewed like 1,000 people. I hired like 100 people for my businesses. And if I had a guy come in who he'd just graduated, and this is sort of back in the 90s, right? He just graduated and he said, I really want to start well over 6 figures. I mean, we were hiring at $50K and it was a great work environment and all of that. But we were hiring at $50K. And if somebody who really is only going to be worth $50K comes in and says, I want well over 6 figures to start, I'm not going to hire him. I mean, hey, man, and I would say to him, listen, I'm not going to hire you. I don't think you can get well over 6 figures. If you can, don't let me stop you, right? Honestly, you're not going to get it here, but, I don't applaud the confidence. I think it's too much, but who am I to say, right? Maybe you'll find someone. Because if I hired a guy who was only worth $50K, but he genuinely, let's say I was able to talk him down or something, like he'd still believe that he was worth well over 6 figures, like 120, 130, 140K, and he would be really discontented. He'd be frustrated. He'd be annoyed, and he'd just constantly be looking for new work, and he'd jump for another 10K more. Like, it's just not worth it. It's not worth training him. It's not worth it. Trying to fit him into the culture and build him into the hierarchy and so on. Like, it's just absolutely not worth it. So for men, if the woman has too high or too elevated a view of her own sexual market value, we don't want to date her. I mean, again, men, a lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll have sex, but we're not going to date her. And for women to have a realistic sense of their own attractiveness is the surest path to genuine happiness. To genuine happiness. And listen, I'm the last guy to say don't have ambition, don't aim high, for sure. I mean, I want to be the greatest philosopher in human history. That's my goal, right? I mean, it's not up to me whether I achieve it, but I will certainly try, right? So I'm fine for ambition. I'm fine for aiming high. But for a woman to believe that she's an 8 or a 9 when she is in fact a 5 or 6, and you got to take the makeup off. You got to take the makeup off. You got to take off the push-up bra. You got to take off the Spanx. You got to take off the lashings of elastic waistbands that turn your ass into like 2 oranges in some netting, right? So you got to take all that stuff off and look at who you actually are. I mean, you see the celebrities without makeup, and that's how they actually look. That's how they actually look. Makeup doesn't count. Makeup doesn't count. And stuff that changes your body doesn't count. Because for men, when we have sex with you, you don't have makeup on, and you're not able to wear all of these body modifications. So that's what really counts for us. The raw, actual, natural person. Aim where you are. And again, I'm going to beat the same drum. But depopulation agenda involves inflating women's egos to the point where they offer up sex to chads and nobody settles down and the birth rate crashes. The man they called Brian, are you with me? Brian. Oh, I don't know. Are you with me? There was an error adding him, so you'll have to cancel. I'm going to just have you stop and then come back in. You're welcome to come back in. So, is he back? Let's see. Brian, thank you. If you want to unmute, I'm all ears.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Stefan. Actually, I'm just joining late, so I haven't been able to catch what if it's a specific topic or just talking about anything today. Okay. Great. So on the I wanted to talk about what you talked with about previous caller. You were telling her that the things that your mother said to you 30 years ago are still in your mind today, or could still be in a person's mind today, and that you had somehow transcended that and moved those things out of your mind. So,
I'm sorry,
what was
which
the
caller? I haven't
process?
had any female callers tonight. Which caller are you talking about?
It was the show. It was a show very recently, like maybe less than a week ago.
Okay.
One girl was on the show with you, and I'm trying to think what the show title was,
No,
but
that's
she
fine.
spoke
I
with you.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't remember the conversation in any particular detail because, of course, I talk to like 100 people a month or more. But it doesn't sound to me like it's something that I would say that I've completely overcome everything my mother ever said to me. That really doesn't sound like something that I would say, and I don't believe that if I did.
No, that wasn't what I was holding you to. I was just kind of paraphrasing the basic idea. The idea was just that you were making a point to her that even though that she was no longer a part of her life, that that could still not, it could still be stuck in her head, even though that person's no longer a part of their life, and that you had been able to, you had gone through some sort of a process that had helped you to. Move beyond it in a sense that like that those things were no longer
Okay, so
programmed into
sorry.
you.
I appreciate the recap. So, what's your question?
So my question was just what that process was that you went through.
What did your mother or father say to you that you think might be burned in your brain?
I just think that that I maybe a lot of things, whether I want them to be or not, but I
Okay,
think they're
just
so
give me
they're
one. Just give me one.
hmm. Well, I think that just like I kind of I have a problem over analyzing everything, and it has something to do with my mom always would offer a lot of suggestions. Well, you could do this. Well, you could do that. Well, you could do this, and it was a lot of things that were kind of vague, like, okay, well, that thing costs money, or okay, well, you have to be here to do that thing, or you have to actually be involved. It's kind of like when George says to Jerry in Seinfeld, he said, I could get a job as a broadcaster. I'm always good at making those interesting comments when we're watching sports games. And Jerry goes, okay, it's a good idea. You know, they usually give those jobs to people that are in broadcasting, you know. But yeah, so she'll say a suggestion kind of like that, like, oh, well, you're so good at making those comments during sports games. You ought to be a sports commentator. It's kind of like, okay, well, that's great, but you know, they usually get that to people that are in broadcasting, kind of like that. So it was, and like I said, it's no longer a factor. It's been many years, you know, but I just wonder how much of
Hang
that
on,
is
hang on,
still
hang on, hang on, hang
ingrained in
on,
my
hang on,
thinking.
hang on. Sorry, I don't quite understand what you. So you're saying, parents can say stuff that's burned in your brain, and how do you overcome it? And what was burned in your brain was your mother saying you're really good at making sports commentary. Maybe you should be a broadcaster. That's the abuse that's burned in your brain.
No, just the overanalyzing. Like, well, I could have done this. I should
Okay,
do
what
this.
did your
Well, oh,
parents
maybe I could have
say
done.
that's burned in your brain? I mean, I can come up with my own thing. It's just better if it's from you because you're the one asking the question.
No, I don't really. I don't have anything specific in that sense. It's just a lot of suggestions on what and ideas of what I should be doing with my life. And
Okay, sorry, I can't do this. I mean, the guy's saying, what about these terrible things that your parents say to you? Hey, you're quite witty at doing sports commentary. So I'm sorry. You're free to feel free to keep listening, but I just can't do the back and forth because it really wasn't getting anywhere. But it's a great question. The question is, how do you uproot early mean things said to you? It could be by a priest or a teacher, or usually it's parents. So I will give you an example from something I saw. I was 15 years old, and at was my friend's house. And he had a really contentious relationship with his mother. His mother was quite claustrophobic. She was a single mom. She dated a lot, and he didn't have really any respect for her and so on. Anyway, and they were having some conflict, and at one point she just whirled on him and she said, I hope that when you get older, you end up with a son just like you. And even I could feel the heat death of the universe rolling across my pores with this. I mean, this felt like an absolute ancient Greek gypsy kill your sheep curse. It felt absolutely appalling and horrible. That she said to him, basically, you are a curse on my existence, and the worst thing that I can think of for you is to have a son like you when you're older. That is absolutely cold and horrendous, right? With my mother, it was in the middle of the night. I still remember this. I was maybe 5 or so. She's screaming, I hate these effing kids, top of her lungs kind of stuff, right? And I mean, I don't want to sound overly mature, but I mean, I got that she didn't really mean it. I mean, it was more like she evaluated, these kids are objectively hateful and I hate them because of X, Y, and Z. She was just lonely, tense, frustrated, isolated, angry, and she was incredibly frustrated because, again, she had the curse of beauty, the curse of slenderness, the curse of being stunning when she was younger, and she was. She had that curse. I wrote about a character like this in a novel once, and I said about this beautiful woman, she wanted to put her beauty to work for her like a glistening slave. I've always loved that phrase. God, I'm a good writer. Anyway, so my mother had the curse, right? The curse of, I gotta put this beauty to work for me somehow. I've gotta make it work. I should be at the top. Like all the people who were on the red carpet are beautiful people. I'm a beautiful beautiful purple. I'm a beautiful person. I should be on the red carpet. All right, this hysteria of I got a depreciating asset. I gotta milk this. And she tried it with my dad, my late father. I mean, he had He was smart. He was funny, not particularly attractive. He used to smoke this super long pipe, like, one of those Gandalf pipes that just goes on. And somebody said to him, why do you smoke the pipe? And he's like, well, my doctor has told me to stay away from tobacco. So get the long pipe. I don't know. Could be kind of goofy. I think it's kind of funny. So my mother rolled the dice. She was an international courier. She delivered packages after the war because she had to get out of Germany for obvious reasons. So my mother and my father met at a party in South Africa, and my father was a pretty good conversationalist when he was younger. He was horribly awkward with me, but that was because of all of the guilt and all that sort of tension of having abandoned us and gone to the other side of the world and leaving us with a crazy, violent woman. But he had his charms, and he was lean, and he was healthy because he was a geologist. He worked for a living, and, well, he wasn't a geologist yet, I guess, when they met. And she thought she had it made. She thought this, high status guy, he came from the Molyneux family is illustrious and historical. There's a Molyneux Society newsletter, which I'm sure studiously avoids me. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but anyway, the name will be recovered in 2 generations. It'll be back on top, right? My father always said, we've got to bring the family name back into prominence. I'm like, I'm on it, Dad. It may not be in the way you want or you're thinking of, but the name Molyneux shall ring across the heavens from the cesspit of Wikipedia to the halls of the SPLC. Anyway, to the front page of the New York Times cult leader. So my mother thought she had it made. She helped my father get his PhD. She helped type up his thesis. They lived in basically a trailer while he was out in the bush, and she had his kids, and he was from a big noble family, and not quite the Kennedys, but not the exact opposite. And so she thought she had it made. She thought, man, my mother's family was prominent as well. My uncle won a literary prize for his poetry. Another uncle won a literary prize, a national literary prize for writing a history of German trade unionism or something like that. And I remember we had the poem that he'd won the prize for in my apartment when I was a kid. Anyway, so my mother thought she had it made, man. She thought that she was all set, that she was going to be the toast of the town, and she was going to be, a doctor's wife, and he had a doctorate in geology. But of course, a doctorate in geology is a pretty big deal in Africa, South Africa, because that's where all the gold is. And it's basically the smog layer of the planet, right? And so she thought she had it made, and it all blew up. And it was very sad. And she got divorced, and then she needed to lock down another guy, and she still wanted that Downton Abbey house, and she still wanted that prestige, and I'm sure that she wanted to ride a couple of horses, and I'm sure that there were trains with nurses and valets behind her, and she wanted to live the high life and Princess Grace of Monaco, and insouciantly play baccarat on the corners of the Riviera, like all the stuff that she wanted to do. And damn it, it's the children that are in the way. If only I didn't have these children, I could be flying with Mary Poppins and Dick Van Dyke on a broom somewhere over Hollywood. And so, so my friend, I never got the chance to talk to him about it. He died in his teens. But if your parent says something appalling to you, and there's a lot of people out there who've said truly appalling things. I hate these effing children. It's pretty appalling. I hate you from a parent. It's pretty appalling. When you grow up, the worst punishment I can think of to inflict upon you is for you to have a child like you. That's just horrendous, and so on. And so what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Well, you have to recognize that people are frightened, greedy, and frustrated. They're frightened, they're greedy, and they're frustrated. So when I was talking about things like IQ and all of that sort of stuff, IQ differences in ethnicity and gender and so on, well, the communists seek to exploit social divides, widen and inflame them to the point where they can take over the government, there's a civil war, and then they can just pursue their generic slaughterfest that they do every time. Like they're just a bunch of serial killers with Santa Claus, an evil Santa Claus as their prophet, right? So when I was saying it's not exploitation, it's IQ that is in general the difference between the classes, that's thwarting them in their desire, and they're greedy, and they're frustrated, and they're frightened that they won't gain power because they're power junkies, power addicts, and also murder addicts, by the way, 100 million plus in the 20th century alone. So my mother, she didn't hate my brother and I. She didn't wake up and say, oh, I've done an objective moral evaluation of the children that I've raised. I was like a couple of months old when my dad and my mom divorced. So it wasn't like she had a bunch of other influences on me. And so it wasn't that my mother had some objective moral standard and she's evaluated all of these people and she said, gee, just unfortunately, the two children I have are just the most hateful people around. It's not how it happened. It's not a real thing. In the same way, like my Wikipedia page or other things which people write about me that's just, horrible and terrible and all that kind of stuff. I'm just in the way of what they want. It's not personal. It's not because they've evaluated me according to some objective moral standard and found me to be a terrible guy, blah, 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 blah. No. I mean, I stand up for children. I stand up for children, and I stand up for adult children to not have to spend the rest of their lives enmeshed in abusive relationships. And I do that because if you are around abusive parents and you continue to see abusive parents and they won't stop being abusive, it means you can't get a quality person to marry you, because quality people don't want to be around abusive parents. You're abusive parents, which means that your shitty parents mean that you get a shitty partner, and then your children have a shitty life, and the whole cycle just repeats. So I stand up for adult children and their right of voluntary association. Right? Forced association is a violation of freedom of association, and I'm a big one for voluntarism. So then the parents who abuse their children, and then some show comes along that reminds the children they don't have to spend time with abusive parents, well, that's really enraging for the abusive parents, of course, because they played a deal, like they played a card hand that had worked for every previous generation, which is just treat your children like shit, and they'll just stick around because society and Christianity says honor thy mother, and oh my God, she's your mother, and you'll be so guilty, and blah. So they played the same card that their parents played and their parents played, and it sucks. It sucks for them that the internet happened to come along and reason and evidence happened to come along and people like me happen to come along. It sucks for them. So they're angry. And I get it. I even sympathize with it to some degree. Like if, your family's got away with crimes for 20 generations, and then suddenly you're the one who gets caught, like that's unfair, right? Why would I not think we'd continue to get away with it? The police are all in our pocket and blah, 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 right? So they're not mad at me. Like they haven't people aren't mad at me. They don't look at me and say, I've got this objective moral standard and Steph sits here and everyone else is better. And they're just frustrated, angry, frightened, and aggressive. And so they lash out. It's not personal to me. My mother wasn't mad at me. She was mad that she wasn't getting what she felt she deserved in life, and she blamed us. Which was a real shame, because if she'd taken responsibility herself, she might actually have gotten to a much better place in life. But, you can't make people take responsibility. So people who are mad at me because maybe their kids have gone no contact because they're just abusive, like adult kids, they're just abusive and they won't change and they just gaslight and get aggressive. I mean, they could sit there and say, gee, my adult kids don't want to speak to me. Maybe I should do something or change something or go to therapy or blah, 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 right? Or read Peaceful Parenting, peacefulparenting.com. But they don't want to do that because they think that they are owed obedience from their children no matter what happens or what they do. And that's a shame. And I feel some real sympathy because parents have got away with this for the last million or so years. And, it sucks. It sucks to be the generation that doesn't get away with it as much. So people haven't evaluated me according to some objective moral standard and found me to be so horribly wanting. I'm just the worst guy around. It's like, no, I'm just in the way of what they feel in fucking entitled to. My mother felt entitled to hobnobbing with celebrities and being on the red carpet and posing for Vanity Fair. She felt, maybe she had the looks for that. I think she probably did. But she felt that she deserved that. And she felt that she was owed that. And my brother and I were in the way. But it wasn't any kind of right. And parents feel like they're owed obedience and subjugation from their kids no matter what they do. And moral philosophy, in the way that I talk about it, gets in the way of that. It's not personal. The communists don't want any explanation other than exploitation as to group differences in outcome. They certainly don't want IQ. So I'm in the way. It's not personal. Like if you're driving along a road, how do you do this when I worked up north? You're driving along a road and some tree has fallen on the road. So what do? Well, you got to keep driving down the road. There's a tree on the road. What do? Well, you move the tree out of the way. It's not personal. You don't hate the tree. The tree's just in the way. And I was in the way of political power. I was in the way of exploiting adult children. I was in the way of communist thirst for destruction. I'm just in the way. And so when we worked up north, we'd try and move the tree. And if we could move the tree, we'd move it out of the way. If we couldn't move the tree, we'd take out our chainsaws, we'd take out our axes, and we'd chop the tree up, and then we'd move like, it's not personal. I don't hate the tree. I mean, I'm annoyed at the tree, maybe, whatever, right? But the tree's just in the way. And moral philosophy is just in the way of what evil people think they're entitled to. It's not personal. So my friend who's dead now, 40 years, when his mother said, "Oh, I hope you end up with a child just like you," right? She's frustrated that she doesn't have credibility with him. She's frustrated that he's not doing what she says. She's frustrated that her life has turned out badly. Oh, boy, the people whose lives turned out badly are some of the most dangerous fucking people around. Holy shysterballs, Batman. They are, silly putty. What's the opposite? There's silly putty, but there's no serious putty. Well, there is. It's called C4. So they are gelignite, man. They are volatile. People whose lives turned out badly, especially when it's too late to fix. My mother, I couldn't figure this out for years and years and years. My mother, one morning, wouldn't get out of bed. I was 11, maybe 11 and a half. She wouldn't get out of bed. She just lay there. She wouldn't answer me. Just lay there. Just eyes open, barely blinking, just staring at the ceiling. Just wouldn't get out of bed. I'd make her a cup of tea. I'd say, "I hope you feel better." I'd go to school. I'd stagger my way through school. I'd come back at lunch. She'd be staring there and the tea would be cold. I'd make her another cup of tea, maybe butter some bread, because we had this, this bread that's indistinguishable from the kind of glue that you use to stick colored things to the wall in kindergarten. And I'd make her another cup of tea, make her a little toast of bread. And this went on. I don't even know for how long. It was a long time. Obviously, she was getting up from time to time to get something to eat or whatever it is. But she's just in bed. I couldn't figure out. Why? And I realized, of course, I did the math later. Oh, that's it. She turned 40. And that's it. She couldn't offer a man any more children. She was on the downside of the wall. The wall. Takes no prisoners. And there's no escaping it. At least not for a woman making very little money, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto. And, she was never really the same after that. She kept losing jobs, and eventually she just stopped working and went on disability and whatever, right? So my mother wanted a life as a PhD doctor geologist's wife, sashaying through high society, international trips, 2 blonde, attractive children, and she just thought she had it made. It all turned to shit. It all went bad. And my God, do you ever not want to spend time around people whose lives have turned to shit, especially if they don't take responsibility, because they'll blame someone. Could be you, certainly was me, certainly was my friend. Because all women have the princess dream, right? Prince Charming, beautiful wedding, happily ever after, wedding cake bliss, happiness, children, and they have a vision of Disney shite, princess shite, whatever it's going to be, right? And some women get it, but very few. And men have their dreams too. I get all of that, right? But we're just talking about women in this particular context. And when women have that dream, it's kind of a mirage if you're not mature and responsible and honest with yourself, right? But when women have that dream, they feel like it's theirs and they own it. Like you own a paid-off house or a paid-off car. Like it's yours. You own it. And if it gets taken away, they go feral. Like if somebody grabbed your baby and started running to the woods, you would, as a man, you would do almost anything to tackle them, you'd shoot them if you could to get your baby back, right? You come back and you say, baby got back. Women absolutely believe that's what they deserve, that's what they've earned, that's what they need, and that's what they have. And if someone takes it away, it's like some squatter shitting in the foyer of your paid-off house. You're mad. This is why women often turn feral in the course of divorce. And this is why they often turn feral as single mothers, because by God, that they deserve to be elegant, Princess of Monaco, Princess Di, princesses, or they deserve to be loved, they deserved everything. They deserved everything. Raising women's expectations collapses the birth rate and the marriage rate more than anything, which is why the devil went as a snake into the Garden of Eden and said to the woman, I mean, you got everything you want. Every single wish of yours is fulfilled. You have a God who adores you, a husband who loves you, a perfect figure. You'll never grow old. You'll never get arthritis. Your boobs will never sag. You'll have full-on Heidi helium balloons from here to eternity. You never have to work for food. You never have to go through the pain of childbirth. It's paradise. It is a perfect situation set up by an omnipotent, all-loving, all-present God who loves you and wants nothing except for you to be happy. Everything you wish for comes true. You'll never be unhappy. But then, of course, Eve, when she sees the snake and the snake says, okay, but one bite of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Yes, it's true. You've got everything you could possibly want. Everything your heart's desire. You'll never age. You'll never be sick. You'll never give birth. No pain, no suffering, no disease, nothing. And then she's like, you're right. This isn't enough. I want more. I deserve more. Why am I not allowed? I've got everything I want. I just can't eat that one little, why? I want it all. And I want it now. And, we can appreciate that in women, I think. I mean, wanting more, wanting better. It's why I don't live in a milk crate under a bridge. My wife makes this place, well, not this study, but makes the place into a girly world paradise that I'm honored to be allowed to live in every day. It's beautiful. But I want more. I want more. I want more. And women don't get what they want in life. It's true of men too. when women don't get what they want in life, what they believe they already have and absolutely, completely deserve. Entire civilizations crumble with the rage and the lashing out. It's crazy. I mean, we men as a whole, we have the flip side. We believe we deserve nothing. Nothing. Oh, shit. A little piece of cake fell off the table. Fantastic. We deserve nothing. We've got to work for everything. A man can't just not eat and be attractive. We've got to do 4,000 crunches an hour. We deserve nothing. We've got to work for everything. Women believe they deserve everything and have to work for nothing. Kind of fits in a way. But we can't understand it as men. We can't understand what we would call absolute psycho entitlement. Like, we can't grasp it deep down. We can't. We can't even get close to that level of entitlement. Imagine sweeping into a restaurant as a man and saying, well, I want the best table and everything I eat for free. Oh, and the best wine. And I want a rose on that table. And you better open the door for me. And can you imagine, as a man, having that level of entitlement? It's mad for men. For men. Can you imagine? I'm getting hungry. Peel me a grape. Get out of here and get me some money too. It's unthinkable for men. Can you imagine sweeping into town and saying, all right, I want to be a batter for, I don't know, what is the local baseball team? The Lakers? Oh, the Lakers? Oh, whatever it is. Set me up to be the opening batter. And I want $50 million a year. Now, make it happen. Genghis Khan would be like, whoa, okay, it's a little too much. There's a little too much entitlement there. Jesus himself would say, I am all powerful, but that's just a little, we can't understand it. So when you thwart entitled people's will, they view you as a tree to get out the way. And if to get you out of the way, they have to call you a white supremacist or a cult leader or a Nazi. It's like, chop up the reputation, just get it out the way. I deserve to go down this road. It would be like if you were left $10 million in a will and people weren't, and the lawyer wasn't giving you the money, you'd be like, that's my money. You better give me that money or there'll be hell to pay. I will raise a stink. I will sue you. I will report you to your regulatory board. If you don't, that's my $10 million. And if you stand between my $10 million and me, there's going to be a well-permed hourglass-shaped hole through your gizzards, and I'll take 2 balls with me. You get me that money. It's my money. I want political power. I want dominion over my children, no matter how badly I treat them. I want to win this election. Well, I'm just a tree in the way, you understand? It's not personal. My mother had a vision of what her life should be, and if her life wasn't that, it sure as shit couldn't be her fault. It had to be someone else's fault. She would get mad at my father, never for her choice in marrying him, only at him. She would get mad at my brother and I, not at her choice to have children with an unstable man or a cold man or all the other complaints she had about him. No. Not her choice, ever. And her willpower, her ego, her identity, her capacity to choose was scooped out of her, I'm sure, by rampaging Russian soldiers that graped their way across Germany after, well, in the closing months and after World War II. So I learned about that later. Gives me some understanding. So when your parents say terrible things to you, it's because they don't have the life they want, and they'll never take responsibility for it, so it has to be your fault. It's not personal. You're just a log in the road. All right. Well, I hope that helps. And I will stop here. Sorry, we've got new callers, but I think I'm going to leave it there. freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. Please, please, if you could, still rebuilding, blah, 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 post the platforming. So if you could help me out, I'd really appreciate that. And peacefulparenting.com, if you could share that. And if you could subscribe at freedomain.locals.com, I'd appreciate that. Send your call-in request to call.freedomain.com, shop.freedomain.com for your tasty merch like this snazzy hat. And don't forget wordwardebate.com for joining me as I reemerge like a pharaoh from a tomb. I reemerge like Lazarus, man. So have a beautiful evening, my friends. Thank you so much. Bye.